Okay, the subject of the lesson is truth. And the golden text, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So truth and freedom and strength and beauty are all dominant themes in this lesson. If we look at the responsive reading, O send out thy light and thy truth. So immediately, truth dispels all darkness, all error, all animal magnetism, and fills all space and beyond with light. When I first read that third verse, the 91st Psalm came to me right away. They that dwell in the secret place of the Most High, that's where truth is, shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Now, interesting also in responsive reading, and you don't have to, contain this because it's probably a little offbeat. So you can erase it if you want. But there's so much in this opening that talks about body parts. It says, verse 5, God is the health of my countenance. And then in verse 2 from Isaiah, loose yourself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. And then in verse 10 from Isaiah, the Lord hath made bare his holy arm. And then there's another one encircled, and I don't see it here. One of my favorite verses, verse 7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings. Now, I'm sure that I've read these before, but put together under truth and a very strong section on Christian Science being a science, and are having to know that God is almighty in heaven and on earth and brings health to the humanity, to human beings. I think I've mentioned before that there's a wonderful article in one of the anthologies, the Coincidence, I think it's called, of the human and the divine. And that just came to me with all this mention of God's truth as touching upon and given in the vocabulary of the human body. So I thought that was interesting. And then there's another thing that came to me. Somewhere in here, I think it's verse 10, all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. The ends of the earth. Now, I've read that many times, but it occurred to me that it runs parallel to something that I used to teach in Roman history and in Latin as a language. There's a story or a report from history that Cicero was giving an oration to get Pompey, the great general, the permission to go after Mithridates, who was a pirate and was giving them trouble in the Mediterranean Sea. And he wanted to lay forth all the credentials of Pompey as the best man to do it. And one of the very clever ways he did it was he could say that all the nations recognize him, etc., etc. But he picked out a small island way off somewhere. And he said, even there, at, and now I'm going to paraphrase, the end of the earth, they know of Pompey and his greatness. And it's interesting to me that in verse 10, all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God, gives the omnipotence of truth in that same idea that to the very outermost part of what we experience, truth is there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then verse 1 from Isaiah, O Lord, thou art my God, I will exalt thee. That's our job, to praise. I will praise thy name, for thou hast done wonderful things. Thy counsels of old are faithfulness and truth. And so I think that links our job as ideas with God, the Almighty. It's the linking of our job and the truth. We are to be faithful and follow the truth. Thy counsels of old. So, the human and the divine coincidence was very uppermost in, I thought, in that part of the lesson. Now, the rest of the lesson. Section 1. A new insight in the well-known story of Moses and the burning bush. And the insight was this. And when the Lord saw that he turned to see the bush, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. Now I realized that that sentence was saying that Moses was receptive. He did not run away from the bush. He turned to examine it and was receptive. And then God prepared him to undo the affliction of his people. It reminded me, Moses' hearing his name, reminded me of hymn 324. Take my life and let it be dedicated, Lord, to thee. And then also, it's interesting to me that the Presbyterian hymn has that same hymn in it. Take my life and let it be dedicated, Lord, to thee. And it reminded me also of what Mrs. Eddy tells us in retrospection and introspection, how she heard a call several times, like Samuel, when she was a girl, and she kept going to her mother, and her mother said no. And then one time her cousin was with her and heard it. And so she finally said, when it came again, speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. And then it never came again. But she was receptive and ready to be prepared to bring us this wonderful science. And in section 1 also, in Psalms, thy word is true from the beginning. I always replace that with in the forever. Okay, section 1, Mary Baker Eddy. I'm so grateful, and it's brought out in verse 18, I guess, citation 18, that Mrs. Eddy used the word science in reading her biography. I hear that she had so many possibilities for the title of her discovery. But it's so important to me that she used the word scientist, because this is the era of science. I have been watching Channel 12. It gives us an idea of what the cosmos is and what the various theories are of electromagnetism and the God particle that they have finally split. And to know that Mrs. Eddy can say, since the author's discovery of the might of truth in the treatment of disease as well as of sin, her system has been fully tested and has not been found wanting. And ignorance of God is no longer the stepping stone to faith. The only guarantee of obedience is a right apprehension of Him, whom to know aright is life eternal. And it's the science of knowing God. And it has been tested. And it's so reassuring as this mortal existence begins to approach something that is extreme science or metaphysics finally. Now, shall I stop? Okay. Now, fewer. No, you're not charging them for this. That's ridiculous. Okay. This is section 2. She begins to mention slavery. And that is so important. There are articles in the Monitor about the terrible incidents of slavery throughout the world. And it's, of course, man is enslaved to this material existence, but it often shows up as terrible mistreatment of mortal man to mortal man. And Mrs. Eddy shows the very direct way that we can abolish slavery and have freedom in the truth. Okay. Man must be free. I'm now at citation 6. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth us not. Hereby we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. And that reminds me of the rule for motives and acts, that we must not influence or being influenced erroneously, that we're able to say, that thought is not my thinking, that is a claim, it's not a condition. That's when we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error and can separate them and cast error into the darkness and the lie, which is what it is. In Christian Healer, the latest book on Mrs. Eddy's biography, she states a healing that she had. I think it was of a child. And the child left and was healed. But the mother called a little while afterwards and said, there's something about his physical condition that has not been healed. A lot has been healed, but there's something that has not been healed. And Mrs. Eddy got down on the floor. That's what this statement says from her. And she cried out, what do I not know of God? Because it's a knowledge of God, His omnipresence, in the act of Christ. Now, she didn't say this, I'm saying this. What she says, what don't I know about God? And she prayed fervently. And just a little while later, the mother called and said the physical condition had yielded. I thought that was very, thereby we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. And she knows the spirit of truth heals all. Okay. Interesting to me in section 2 that the still small voice that we've had a lesson a couple of weeks ago, and here again, the still small voice is mentioned. And she calls it scientific thought, reaches over continent and ocean to the globe's remotest bound. There's that ends of the earth again. The inaudible voice of truth is to the human mind as when a lion roareth. It is heard in the desert and in dark places of fear. It arouses the seven thunders of evil and stirs their latent forces to utter the full diapason of secret tones. Then is the power of truth demonstrated, made manifest in the destruction of error. This is a repetition, in other words, of the very important thought that the upheavals that we see are not given to us by the all-powerful God, by no means, but they are destroying itself, and we need not have fear. So that was interesting to me, that the still small voice then became to human beings the seven thunders of evil and stirs itself to destroy itself. Okay. Then, that same section, 24, the Word was made flesh. Again, a repetition of the coincidence of the human and the divine. Divine truth must be known by its effects on the body. So that the responsive reading, with all those body parts in it, prepared us for this clear thought, this rock in Christian. This was in section 2 and in citation 24. The Word was made flesh. And it came to me also in her son. 9. It's 9. It's line 24. I'm sorry. It's citation 9. I'm sorry. And it came to me. You who called me late have no way to criticize me. Okay. But you'll bring it forth again sometime, I know. Enable us to know, as in heaven, so on earth, God is omnipotent, supreme. That's her spiritual interpretation of a line from the Lord's Prayer. And that came to me when I read this particular citation. As in heaven, so on earth, God is omnipotent, supreme. Okay. Now, let's see what else we have here. Section 3. This is on the resurrection that Jesus speaks about. When ye have lifted up, this is citation 11. When ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am He. And Jesus' resurrection continually comes to me as our resurrection. Certainly it was for the disciples. They were real dullards until resurrection. I don't mean to be critical of all these saints, but they just didn't get it. Really? Right. Yes. Okay. And like freedom comes in here again. We are freed from death through spiritual life. And he says in line 36, I guess it is, in citation 11, if the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. And that, I believe, was through his resurrection. Okay. Section 3, citation 13. Sensualism is not bliss, but bondage. For true happiness, man must harmonize with his principle, divine love. The Son must be in accord with the Father. There is so much claim that we can find bliss in material living, with new medicines, with new electronic equipment, with so-called human science bringing us this bliss. That we can live longer, not have pain, etc. But it is bondage. And the thought came to me of the hymn, eternal mind the potter is, and thought eternal clay. The hand that fashions is divine, his works pass not away. Man is the noblest work of God, his beauty, power, and grace, immortal, perfect as his mind, reflected face to face. That's the real man, and he has joy, not bliss, as defined by sensuality. Very interesting section, I thought, in citation 15, about the Jews and Abraham, that they had been made free by Abraham. They were enslaved to no one. And Jesus makes clear, let's see, what does he say? Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. And the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth ever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. And Mrs. Eddy explains the opposite and false views of the people hid from their sense Christ's sonship with God. They could not discern his spiritual existence. That's why they kept going back to a mortal man, Abraham. And still, when you think of the woman who was taken in adultery, and Jesus is revealing to them that they were controlled by sin, so that they were not free by any means. Anyway, that's the thought that came to me. Now, I think I'm about done on commentary. Let me see. The word link keeps showing up. The real man. This is line 3, I guess, in citation 15. The real man being linked by science to his maker, mortals need only turn from sin and lose sight of mortal selfhood to find Christ, the real man. And Jesus, of course, in his Christly mission, was the link to recognize, behold what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Sons and daughters. Okay. Okay. Section 5. Oh, it's just a lovely thing. No, this is the end of section 4. Fevers are errors of various types. I've done so much reading that brings out that fever and fear are the same thing, based on the belief that mind is in matter and discord as real as harmony. Fear, Mrs. Eddy often says, is the basis of ill health. And most particularly from what I have read in the anthologies, a fever case is a fear case. I think that's very interesting. Then in section 5, there's one of my favorite verses. When we speak of fasting, we speak of an attempt to get closer to God, like Yom Kippur, a fast to withdraw oneself from the sinful world and try to make atonement with God. And then this wonderful thing in Isaiah. What would we do without Isaiah? I don't know what I'd do with the Old Testament without him. Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily. That is the most wonderful definition of medical means. Okay. I think that's it. I'm going to close on that because it's so wonderful. That approaches spirit. Let me see this one. Oh, just that it's interesting in the construction of the lesson that the last word in the lesson in section 6, discerning the rights of man, we cannot fail to foresee the doom of all oppression. Slavery is not the legitimate state of man. God made man free. And that is the last word of the golden text. The truth shall make you free. It's just a lovely little ribbon tied round the lesson as a gift to us from Mrs. Eddy. Okay. There's something I should have said about Moses. When I talked about, or the lesson talked about, the burning bush. Okay? Now I got myself in the wrong lesson here. That's why I can't find it. Okay. When I read about Moses' receptivity at the burning bush, I recalled also that there is a statement about Moses' character in Numbers. Let me see, Numbers 12, verse 3. Moses was meek above all men on the face of the earth. And meek, of course, is humble. And that's the condition we need to be in to be receptive. So I saw the connection. It's in Numbers on the basis of Moses is getting in trouble with Miriam because he married an Ethiopian woman. And Miriam thought that was disgusting. And God spoke and said, I believe these are God's words, that Moses was meek above all men on the face of the earth. And Miriam got leprosy for talking like that. And they had this, she had to stay in her tent a certain number of days before she was healed, and they could continue their quest. in the wilderness. But I always thought of Moses more or less like Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments. But apparently he had a meekness about him. And that is not weak. That is strong. That gave him strength, which is one of the other associations we make with truth, strength. And so he had a humble character that was receptive and gave him strength. I think that's very interesting. Okay.